such a sad thing that I just keep on noticing with people. Like yesterday, I was leaving the post office and this woman was just sitting in her little minivan with a mask on her face, sitting alone in her minivan with a mask on her face. And I thought, that's just so common. You see that nowadays. You see all these people sitting in their cars or driving their cars all alone with masks on their face. And it makes me have compassion over them, because I'm thinking, what's it like to live in such fear? Such hopelessness. Hoping that this thing that's covering your face is going to be your ultimate source of protection, besides the shots that they rely on for protection. You know, and it reminds me of this video I saw about these scientists that were doing an experiment with fleas. They had a whole jar full of fleas. And you know, fleas have this ability to jump. I mean, pound for pound, they are incredible little creatures. And so you see these fleas jumping up and down, bing, 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 bing. You know, there was a lid on top of the jar. So they're jumping and they're hitting the lid and just keep, they're going over and over again. Bunches and bunches of fleas, and they can't escape. And the scientists bring them into this room and set them on some sort of a table, and they leave. But there's a camera. The camera's filming these fleas, and you're watching these fleas just jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping. And then eventually they just kind of slow down, slow down, slow down, till eventually they're not jumping anymore. They lost hope. A little while later, the scientists come back in and they remove the lid from the jar. You guys are free now. You're free. But the fleas, they're not looking up. None of them are looking up and saying, hey guys, we're free. Let's go for it. They got so used to defeat that they remained defeated, even though freedom was right there. Effortless for a flea to jump out of a little jar like that. It reminds me of so many people today. Makes me have compassion. But that's not what I want to talk about today. What I wanted to talk about was a story I read some time ago of this woman that was raising butterflies and studying butterflies. But first, the butterfly starts off as a caterpillar. So she'd get these caterpillars and put them in a big aquarium, right? Big glass aquarium, and had little tree branches and twigs and sticks in there. And these caterpillars would eat the leaves off of the little branches, and until eventually the caterpillar would go into what's called the cocooning stage. And while the caterpillar is in this cocoon, it undergoes something that's called metamorphosis. In Greek, they would call it metamorpho. That's where we get the English word metamorphosis. Metamorpho, which means to change shape. And that's exactly what goes on with a caterpillar. And it's really, really a very painful process. I mean, their bodies break down and liquefy, and you could just imagine the pain that the little creature goes through. But eventually what happens is when it goes through its cocooning phase, that little butterfly starts to break out of that cocoon. And soon enough, when it breaks out of the cocoon, now it's the butterfly. It's what it was meant to be. Starting off a caterpillar and transforming, metamorpho, changing shape into the butterfly. Well, this one time, one of these little caterpillars, it did everything. It ate like the other caterpillars, and And before you know it, it goes into its cocooning phase. But this little caterpillar seemed to be in a cocoon phase for quite some time, and she noticed that it was starting to try to break free from that cocoon, but it seemed like it must have been struggling and taking too long, because it was a much longer process than the other caterpillars. So she wants to see this butterfly come out of this cocoon, and she thought she'd go ahead and help the little guy, right? Kind of like if a baby chick was trying to break free from the eggshell, and you start breaking away the eggshell to help it. Well, that's what she was kind of doing with this cocoon. So she starts peeling away, and little did she know that what she did actually caused the death of that butterfly. She thought she would help by speeding up the process, but instead it did reverse. They killed the butterfly because the timing wasn't right. She was trying to hurry it up, and she thought she was even doing it a favor. And that's what happens to so many of us, so many of you. We go through changes in our life, and you can call it like our cocooning phases. And if you're like me, you seem to get back in a cocoon over and over and over again and go through this painful process of transformation. And you got other people, especially the religious types, that try to speed things up, right? And call you names, tell you you're a slacker. You don't love God enough. Look at you. And instead of actually advancing you and helping you, they're actually doing the opposite, right? You know how many people I know, when I was a Jehovah's Witness for 30 years of my life, first 30 years, you know how many people I know that are no longer here, committed suicide because of this? Because they're going through some type of a process, cocooning phase, changes in their life, and then their spiritual leaders, their spiritual guides, spiritually beat them up, mentally abuse them, thinking that they're helping these people to speed up the process, right? It's the opposite of what Jesus told Peter in the Bible. Before Jesus goes back to heaven, he says, Peter, I want you to do something. I want you to feed my little sheep, feed them. But some people, when they read that, they feed sheep, beat sheep, and they end up thinking Jesus was saying, beat my little sheep. Beat them, make sure you beat them, and beat them good. But you have a process you're going through, and you might even beat yourself up. You're so used to getting beat up by others that you start beating yourself up. I'm one of those people. I beat myself up worse than anybody could beat me. But if you've ever studied or read about what happens to an oyster when a pearl is formed, you see, you've got this oyster, you've got the shell, you've got this mollusk, the life inside of the oyster, and then when an invader goes in there, something that starts to irritate that mollusk, what the mollusk does is it starts to pour out this fluid. It's its life force. And this fluid is called nacre, N-A-C-R-E, nacre. And it wraps the nacre around this irritant. And it keeps on wrapping it and keeps on wrapping it, pouring out its life, until eventually what is formed is a pearl. And it's a process. And you can't do anything to speed that up. It has to go through its own process and timing, right? It's just like trees that produce fruit, right? People are compared to trees in the Bible. Oh, there's the fruitless trees, and then there's the ones that produce fruit. And if you see a fruitless tree, well, you think it's worthless and it needs to be plucked up and thrown into the fire because it's no good. But little do people know that some trees produce fruit much quicker than other trees, right? You know that, right? There's a certain olive tree that it takes 14 years on average until you even see the beginnings of the production of fruit. But it still is producing, you just don't see it. And it might not be happening fast enough for you, and you might want to take that olive tree and pull it out by the roots and throw it in fire and say no good, when that thing was just going through a process and the timing wasn't what you expected. Same thing with coal. Same thing goes for coal. You know, you might see a piece of coal and think, well, that's, you know, it's got a little value, but not really much. But you give that coal enough time and pressure and put it under a tremendous amount of pressure, and instead of crushing the coal and turning it into powder and saying this is worthless, what a waste. No, that coal goes through a metamorphosis, a transformation, and it becomes a diamond. Now you might want that diamond to appear much quicker, speed the process up. But it's got to go through its own timing to get there, right? And creation speaks to us, you guys. I mean, if you are a believer in God and creation, then you must let creation speak to you. He's trying to communicate things to you through his creation. And one of those things must be patience. Because you're going to not only have so many people that are impatient with you, but you might even be impatient with yourself. And if you're impatient with yourself, you are most definitely going to be impatient with others, because you can't give to others what you yourself don't have. Do you understand? You can tell them, be patient, but you can't give them patience from yourself unless you already have it for yourself. I want to just quickly go back to that little caterpillar, then I'm going to get going. And I just want you to think about something and let it sink in, and you decide what it means. Right? Because you have something in you, and you might not be aware of it. And that something in you is the true you. And it is called your spirit. You might not see it with your eyes. And whatever is in you, contained in you, you might think it's taking too long. Why won't this process just happen? Why can't I see this finished work? Right? Kind of like that little caterpillar. When am I going to see my wings? When am I going to be able to soar in the skies and fly in the sky? When am I going to truly become who I'm destined to be? And that little caterpillar might look at itself in the mirror and say, you know, I'm just a caterpillar. And you might look at yourself in the mirror and you might say, you know, I'm really nothing. I'm really nobody. Who am I? And what is this talk about? I have something in me that's so powerful, so amazing, right? It's like an onion. If you just take an onion and you peel it, you know, at first you take the outside of an onion and you smell it, and yeah, you can tell it's an onion, but then you peel a layer away and, oh yeah, it smells stronger, and peel it away. And when you just get to the center of that onion, man, all of that power that's within, it hits you so much that it might make your eyes water. And people could smell it from far away. It's in there, but it's covered by layers. And these layers get peeled away and they get broken away, just like that little caterpillar in the cocooning phase. It starts to break down and melt away. But this caterpillar, before this transformation begins, he's looking at himself saying, I'm just a caterpillar. I'm never going to be one of those guys flying around the skies. That's just for them. And those guys that are flying around might be saying, hey, what's taking you so long? What's taking you so long? Come on, get on with the process. And the caterpillar starts the cocooning phase, and the process is just, it seems like it's just taking way too long. What's wrong with this caterpillar? What's wrong with that olive tree taking so long? 14 years, give me a break. But what if it took 16 years? What if the one that averages 14 years took 20 years? Is it ever going to produce this fruit? Well, eventually, but maybe the timing's not right for you, so you get impatient. Or others get impatient. But this is what I want you to think about, and it's the truth. That caterpillar might be looking at itself in the mirror and saying, I'm just a caterpillar. I'm never going to become a butterfly. But here's what the caterpillar doesn't know, and here's what you might not know either. If you extract the DNA from that caterpillar, that DNA will always read butterfly. Let me say this one more time. You have a caterpillar, and if you extract some of its DNA and you study that DNA will read loud and clear that thing is actually a butterfly.